Mr. Mayor. They're being held up because of this guy. They're being held up because of him. This is ridiculous. Richard Battersby, good Lord.
Good evening, and should like to call this meeting of the Fairfield City Council to order, please. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bertani.
Here.
Councilmember Moy. Councilmember Vaccaro.
Here.
Vice Mayor Tim.
Here.
And Mayor Price.
And we do have a quorum. And the invocation this evening will be led by Pastor Ron Swisher from my church, the Community United Methodist Church. Pastor Ron, please.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members and staff, to the courageous firefighters and first responders throughout our state, to the citizens of Solano County, in fact, all the counties in California, the horrendous catastrophes and tragedies that we're all experiencing. May God's grace and God's mercy and peace be with you all. It's always an honor and a privilege to give the invocation here at City Council. Though this is my calling to pray and to counsel and to comfort, but I do not take it for granted. I do believe in prayer, and I believe in what prayer brings to people's lives. Therefore, I always offer prayer with a sense of humility and a sense of hope. With that in mind, let us pray. Kind and loving God, we confess our hurt and vulnerability in this world with such natural disasters, from the hurricanes to the floods, to the earthquakes and these horrendous fires in our own backyard. We cry, we protest, we feel such devastation. We trust we can be honest in expressing all we are and believe you care about us and you love us in spite of all that makes us feel crushed and hopeless. We are thankful for all and for so many who have responded with giving and caring with all they have. And maybe that is the way you help us get through these tragedies. Continue to help us find ways we can be resourceful and productive and fruitful for families and friends and neighbors and citizens of our world. Do not give up on us, O Lord, and never let your love let us go. Hear our prayers to be better people, to be whole, to be gracious, to be kind, to be examples of truth, justice, and peace. Bless our efforts to save, to free, to love, and be powerful people of your grace, joy, and hope. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. And the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the Vice Mayor. Chuck, if you would, please.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, would you join me, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll begin with council reports. And Councilmember Vaccaro, would you begin, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's always good to see a packed house here tonight. Well, I really don't know where to begin. I won't keep this too long. I know if I was to thank everybody involved in the firefighting and all the people that helped, we'd probably be here all night from all of us. I just want to say, first of all, my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody in Napa and Sonoma and Solano that lost their homes, of course, family members who lost their lives. Just keep them all in our prayers. I'd also like to thank all our city staff, all our city workers that just went above and beyond the call of duty to help out and keep our city of Fairfield safe. You guys were incredible. I know that I was in touch with the city manager on a almost bi-hourly basis throughout the weekend and when the fire first started. So I do really want to thank everybody involved. Also, like I said, if you thanked everybody, we'd be here for a long time. I do want to give a special thank you to Kyle and his staff at Napa Deli. I know that they provided food for our firefighters and had a lot of volunteers out there, and I know they did an exceptional job. And last, of course, but not least, Chief Tony Velasquez, I see you out there. To you and your incredible staff, all the firefighters, the command staff, all I can tell you guys is great job. And I know that everybody in this city feels the same way. I think they deserve a round of applause right now. And that's my report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Bertani, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming out this evening to our city council meeting. Thanks for watching from home. I echo my colleagues' comments, and I will just add that as a community resident and as a member of this city council, I am so proud. I'm so proud of the coordinated effort, not only within Solano County, but surrounding counties. I am so proud of our city manager, our fire chief, our police chief, and all of our first responders who did everything very well. And I know that that resulted in property and lives being saved. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for a job well done. We are on point. We're on point in Solano County. You're very welcome. And just a word of prayer, faith, hope to those who have lost structures, for those who have lost family members. Know that God is here with us in the smoke, in the rising of what will be built again. Remember and know that God is with you. That's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Moy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to say a couple words about actually the folks of Fairfield and Solano County. Of course, the biggest thanks in the world is, as my colleagues have said, to first responders, but also everybody else in this city who worked in the Office of Emergency Services. We were running 24 hours, of course. So sometimes I saw one of our department heads getting ready to go on for her shift and in Parks and Recreation. So she said they're always ready in Parks and Recreation. So it was across the board to every level of this city. And of course, firefighters and police are more on the front lines. And at the same time, a lot of our first responders and others had to evacuate their own homes. And one of them had to evacuate a second time. And so, when we think about firefighters, police, I always think of them as kind of invincible, and we all know that they aren't. But at a more human level, they are very I mean, just like the rest of us, you know, you get nervous if your husband or wife is at home and you have to move them and you got to get them out. And then you have to go back to work 24 hours. You have to keep going. And so that was going on. Our city manager led a great effort. He did keep us all informed. And I know that at least one of us had to leave their home. And so we also were trying to keep people informed. And, it was a difficult thing. But who I really want to thank are the people of the city and the people of Solano County, because they listened. They did what authorities asked, and you can't have safety unless that happens. So that was really important. The other thing is, from young children all the way to the most seasoned senior citizens, they helped bringing by food, praying, making signs of gratitude, and putting them up around where first responders could see them. I spend some time on Facebook, as some of you might know, and I checked. There was this one place where you could go and check to see were people in need and what did they need and how many people were there to help. I saw about fewer than 100 people had said in the Fairfield area, Solano County, let's say, that they needed help. And there were more than 2,000 people who offered everything from I will bring food to you to I have a 2-seat car and I will come back and forth however many times it takes and I will get you out of there. And it's amazing. And I'll say this, and I'm very biased because I was born and raised here. You can't beat Fairfield. You cannot. If we work together like we did through this, we can do anything. We can, and we will. And yes, God is with us. And my prayers are with everybody who continues to suffer. So thank you, Fairfield. Fairfield's strong.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, just real quickly, the police officers, the fire guys, they go into harm's way, and I think it's a given that they know anytime that's what they get paid to do. That aside, it's not like a Disneyland ride where you know, yeah, it's going to scare the bejesus out of me, but everything's going to be okay. You don't know. And fire, I was the one that bailed out of my house. Fire scares me because I've seen how just devastating it can be. And actually, I was gone long enough to wrinkle all my shirts and clothes and all that stuff. But the people that I wanted to thank, absent the police and fire, because God bless them, and like Catherine Moisetter, the citizens, because they're not the ones that have to fight the fires. They're the ones that expect the problems to be handled for themselves. But they understood that we were overwhelmed. We didn't have enough firefighters. There weren't enough first responders for the first couple of days. And, I mean, they just stepped up. But then they stepped up. Citizens stepped up. I think the highway patrolman and the National Guard outside of my street, the blockage was right there. I think they had more food than they knew what to do with. But food and soda and people just giving them thumbs up. Just people coming up to them, just regular citizens. And then, of course, the Napa Deli, and you go to Safeway, and Solano College, just citizens. And when you say just citizens, these are our neighbors, these are our friends. And they came together in a time of need. And this is the biggest crisis that I'm aware of that's hit Fairfield in, 40 years probably. So I haven't seen that before. And it kind of warms your heart. And then, of course, then you see the signs that the kids are putting up, adults are putting up. So I just want to thank them, and hopefully we'll get through this. They're still fighting. The fire it's not even controlled yet. It's just partially contained. There's so many fires, and hopefully the winds will cooperate. But Napa and Sonoma, I'm afraid, still have their hands full for probably the foreseeable future. So we'll see what happens. Mayor, thank you, sir.
Well said, thank you. And I'll make mine very, very brief. I am so impressed with the reactions from people all over Fairfield talking about how can I help, what can I do? And my colleagues are absolutely correct. Out at the Napa Deli, there were kindergarten students who were helping prepare more than 5,000 sack lunches for all those first responders. Just amazing. There were also teachers out there from Nelda Mundy all the way down through Cordelia, as well as elsewhere in Fairfield. College students home for a weekend were helping too. So ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor and great source of comfort and solace to know that we live in a community that responds so well. And let us not forget those firefighters from Travis Air Force Base, as well as those civil engineers who were very, very much involved in making certain that the infrastructure in Green Valley was functioning well. And I too would like to add my kudos to all city staff. Remarkable. You'll never know how many hours they spent in that emergency operations center, making certain that all of us were safe. Mr. City Manager, thank you for leading that cause. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to live in Fairfield, isn't it? And the churches responded as we knew they would. Your report, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for the kind words. And I want to echo your comments in a little bit of a different direction and magnify and appreciate you for some decisions that you've made in the past. So first, I just want to share from my perspective, last week was humbling. It was humbling to see the employees of this organization mobilize in a coordinated way to drop what they were doing, to work around the clock, to give up their own lives to help and make sure that this community was safe. And I think we can all attest that the response was absolutely awesome. And I know there were moments when we had our own set of fears, and as Councilwoman Moy reiterated, staff were forced to evacuate on their own, but put that aside and put the community first, and that was truly humbling. And then there was the community response. You've all well characterized the breadth, the amount, the giving that was occurring last week. It was absolutely unbelievable. Churches, individuals, service organizations, schools, teachers, it was absolutely unbelievable. People calling me midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, wanting to open up their churches for shelters and figure out how can we get involved and help. The CERT team, the explorers, the reserves, I mean, everyone played a part in keeping this community safe. So it was absolutely just a humbling experience to be part of it. And so I appreciate all the comments that you've made tonight. The other part of this, though, is I do want to connect this to a decision we brought in front of you a few years ago. So under the leadership of our fire chief, we were very mindful of the fact that we wanted to distinguish this community for our ability to respond to emergencies. And I think that we felt that, looking back a few years, we weren't in a position where we were adequately prepared. And so we came to you and asked for you to give us the authority to spend funds to build out our Fire Station 37, to create an EOC that we could take pride in. And I think that you can see firsthand the wisdom of your leadership and your direction in terms of the abilities that you gave us to be prepared and capable of responding. And so while I know that there's a lot of people to thank, the staff and the community, I do also want to take a moment and thank you personally for your ability to give us that and to give us the opportunity to create something that I think we all felt made a big difference this past week. So thank you very much.
And there are no changes to the agenda, are there? No. Madam Clerk, your report, please.
I was asked by someone to let the community know that Solano County Fairgrounds, they still are in need of volunteers that can handle large animals, and they're actually asking for volunteers around the clock for 4-hour shifts. You must be 18 or older, and the phone number to call for more information is 707-551-2008. And I believe it's going to be in the paper tomorrow, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And then if you would read the process for public comments, please.
Under public comments, the public may speak on items not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council, provided that no action may be taken on off-agenda items except as authorized by law. Off-agenda items from the public will be taken under consideration without discussion by the council and may be referred to staff. To speak on an agenda item, if you haven't already done so, please complete a speaker's card and give it to me before the time for public comment on that item. Speakers are requested to limit their comments to 4 minutes with 1 minute to summarize their remarks. Thank you.
And our first speaker will be Dan Marshall, to be followed by Veronica Reyes, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City staff. My name is Dan Marshall. I'm the president of the Police Managers Association. And I'm here tonight just to first off say thank you for considering our contract, which is on consent calendar tonight. Hopefully everything goes through as planned. But also to encourage you to please finish the rest of the contracts. We still have 3 groups that have open contracts right now. And it's obviously very important that we get everybody done. So again, thank you for consideration of ours. Please work with the others to get them done as well.
Veronica Reyes, please.
Sorry. I would like to say what an honor it is to be here today. I'm here tonight to discuss and raise awareness about the seasonal flu vaccination. As many of you are already aware, we are in the middle of the flu season, a time when the likelihood of contracting the influenza virus is at an all-time high. According to the Center for Disease and Control and Prevention, the flu tends to increase in the month of October. So we are at a great advantage during this time to receive the vaccination, acquire all of its immunitive properties, and be prepared for the peak of the flu in the months of December through February. The flu vaccination is an important preventative tool for people with chronic health conditions as well as the general public. It is said to reduce hospitalizations among 79% of diabetic patients and 52% of chronic lung disease patients. What is so significant about this vaccination is that not only do you protect yourself, but you protect the community as well. And anyone who is more vulnerable to serious flu illnesses, such as our younger children, the elderly, and again, anyone experiencing chronic health conditions. Overall, the flu vaccine is extremely beneficial, and I do urge the community of Fairfield to do its part and protect themselves as well as their loved ones and the community as a whole. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was a wonderful public service announcement. And on Channel 26, people will be reminded that they need to get their vaccinations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
Richard Battersby, to be followed by Mr. George Gwynn, please.
Hello, Mayor, City Council staff. As you know, I'm Richard Battersby, and believe it or not, I don't really want to be here tonight, but David mentioned there was going to be an item on the agenda, so here I am. We found out Wednesday night, Thursday, and had first access to this Friday evening, so I spent a little bit of time over the weekend doing some research, specifically regarding item 10, but that's not why I'm here right now. While I was going over some of the past correspondence, and this goes back to 2015, I noticed there was a drastic difference in the tone, and it was what previously was very collegial and cordial, polite interchanges. That message has changed. since this process started, and that kind of bothered me. So I went back in and I wanted to figure out when did this start happening? And I was actually able to see that based on some emails. And believe it or not, it was in February 2016. And I feel bad that things have gotten to where they are, where I feel like it's a very confrontational, less than friendly interchange. But I could see when that changed, and it was actually February 2016. And that was at the time that I asked the city regarding the Popeyes development, hey, you know, municipal code says this is supposed to be 15 feet, but it's only 5 feet. How can that be? And it took a while to get a response back, but the response back was, you know, we used averaging to calculate this minimum distance, which, as you know, if you're in engineering or construction or public works for that matter, it's a minimum or maximum is just that. And it just seems to me that that was the triggering point, and I feel that it's really unfortunate that that one situation that to me is still not resolved really tainted, really influenced our interaction, my relationship with the city, my family's relationship with the city, others' relationship with the city. Those of you that remember Harry, Mayor Price, I volunteered to carry the message for the city of Fairfield to Washington, D.C. when we had meetings scheduled on the Hill several years ago. I was a strong supporter of the city, and I'm just really sorry that it's deteriorated to this point, and I hope that we can work through that. I think the way to do that is to understand exactly what took place, and I don't want to get into item 10, but I just wanted to share with you while I was going back, I could see a distinct change in the tone and message, and that's when it occurred. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. George Gwynn, please, our final speaker.
Good evening once again. I hope you guys are listening to what Mr. Batterby said, and you guys can reach a resolution. That said, there was an article in the DR a few days ago about the city of Fairfield and the county getting together at the event center tomorrow night at, I think it's 6 o'clock, to have a meeting about the homeless. And there was a speaker, I'm sorry, not a speaker, there was a commenter at the end of the article that talked about back during the 40s, there were 120,000 Japanese Americans that were put in a concentration camp, and they had their homes stolen or their property disappeared. It was stolen essentially also. And fast forward to now, and you got lots of homeless people, some who could be helped, and the ones that have mental problems or chronic alcoholics or drug people are a lot harder to do anything with. And the commenter mentioned that it was kind of like the world turned upside down. The Japanese Americans were quite productive. They didn't require anything from the government. They took California, which was largely a desert back in the 40s, and turned it into a really productive agricultural area, large parts of it. And when you fast forward to now, then we got people that are producing or having to spend a lot of resources for people that don't produce. And I recall recently going to Alameda, and I was still in Oakland, but I noticed on the sidewalk to my right as I was driving along, there was this homeless encampment right on the sidewalk, and they had their tents and their garbage all piled up on the sidewalk, and it's the worst thing I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of stuff, but this was really bad. And it reminds me, you guys have a pension problem. You have unfunded liability. There was an article recently about the city of Vacaville is really in bad shape. And if they're in bad shape, you guys can't be that much better off, because they got a lot more economics than you do in a lot of ways. And seems to me that before you launch on another thing that creates a negative number for the balance sheet, you need to make sure your house is in order. So I really hope that something's done about the pension unfunded liability. Some things really need to be done to make sure that doesn't take the city down. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We turn to the process for consent calendar, but before we do, City Manager would like to respond to Mr. Gwynn.
George, I just wanted to comment on the workshop that it was canceled for tomorrow night because a few of the speakers are dealing with impacts from the fire. So I just want to make sure you're aware. You're welcome.
And now, Madam Clerk, the consent calendar, please.
All matters listed on the consent calendar are to be approved with one motion unless a member of the council or the public requests that separate action be taken on a specific item.
And I have 2 requests to speak cards, colleagues, so we'll take those 2. But before we do that, let me explain that Councilman Moy and I have to abstain on item number 2. So we'll be abstaining. So, Mr. Vice Mayor, you've got that all taken care of.
Sure.
Okay?
Very good.
So, and we'll take the first 2 speakers first, okay? For item number 2, Ashley Tubb, please.
No, I think that's probably for the, yes.
Ashley Tubb, is it item number?
Ashley, do you want to speak for the golf course SRI, or do you want to speak for the downtown ordinance, Heart of Fairfield?
Okay, thank you. And for item number 3, Richard Battersby, please.
Hello again, Mayor. Like I said, I didn't necessarily want to be here, but since I am here, I had a couple quick questions on this acquisition for staff. Back in 2015, I had asked the question about the council approving all formal competitive invitations to bid, which at the time I was told that it didn't apply to the Park and Ride project because it was a public project, but it does specifically apply to the purchases of supplies and contractual services. And that's in Fairfield Municipal Code 28.31. I actually had it on my little presentation, but I have one copy here. And my question for the city is, if the council's not approving the invitations to formal competitive bidding, how is this not in violation of Municipal Code 28.31?
Mr. City Attorney, would you like to respond, please?
I'd have to take a review of how this purchase was done before I'd be able to answer that question, so I actually can't answer that tonight.
Because I've been monitoring, you know, I'm a frequent flyer down here at times, and I have never once on the agenda seen an item presented to the council, an invitation for bid to be approved, because what this municipal code section says is the council is supposed to be notified for any formal competitive bidding, including, you know, blah, 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 general description, but it does say the council is supposed to approve the invitations, and I've not seen that ever taken place here.
Well, which is true, and we have not done that ever. And I tell you what, to do that, you would not be able to, it would delay all of the city's purchases. The problem is I have not looked again back at that specific language and how it could relate to this item. So that's unfortunately is why I can't definitively tell you how that interacts with the solicitation that took place in this situation here.
So is
based on our review, I tell you what though, if there is some confusion about this with our bidding for our regular items we need to conduct the city, I would really recommend that we further clarify the code. We have been working on an overall amendment to our purchasing ordinance just to clean it up because it's been around for a long time and there are ambiguities within it. That's not ready yet. That's going through a lot of staff review. But again, in order to answer that question specifically on this item, I'd have to take a further look at it.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Oh.
Yeah, thank you. I think that probably in the, 35 years that I've been with the city, the city manager's authority is $25,000. Anything over that we approve. We don't look at every competitive bid other than what comes in this. But what I don't want to do is we're not doing anything illegal. And your interests well, in the last, 2 years, 3 years, probably over 500 emails. And it gets to a point where we start to grind to a halt. And I certainly don't want to let that happen. I don't want to do anything illegal. But us voting on whether the police department gets new police cars that are budgeted, that comes out of the vehicle replacement fund, this is something that we've been doing for 30 years. I'm not going to sit here and go, well, you know what, now we need to put this to a halt because you disagree and you and the city attorney disagree on so many things. And I was going to save this for item 10, but we're starting to, you can see what we're doing now. We're starting to grind to a halt. So unless the city attorney says, no, do not vote on this, I'm of the opinion, the lay opinion, but having done this for many, many years, that we're in fact not doing anything illegal.
Well, the actual award of the contract, does meet the bidding requirements of the code in terms of the actual purchase. I can, if the council wants to proceed this evening on this, as we've done many times in other cases, I can report back to you just with respect to how do we reconcile this provision that speaks about the council approving the invitation for bids. I'd be concerned here if, for example, the actual solicitation of proposals was done improperly. That's a major problem if that occurred. That itself was not, the city did go through a competitive bid process to get the bid before you tonight. So I would, it's up to the council how they want to proceed, if they want to further report to me next meeting, or if they want to approve this tonight. I think that's going to be fine. I think I would want to give you a report, though, with respect to this provision that Mr. Battersby is referring to.
Well, yeah, and I think Mr. Battersby deserves an answer, but what I'm saying is that I don't think it's something that we need to put on hold. And we have a business to run, and
Yes.
that's my opinion. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Boyd, please.
Mr. City Manager, what does the delay of 2 weeks look like on this?
I would have to, I would like to just ask if the police department, if the chief has any comments on whether or not this would impact our bid on the vehicles. That I don't know. That'd be the only thing I could possibly fathom is that we lose our bids, but I didn't see anything that would give me that concern initially.
I just, I just want to make a comment. We need to follow our own city code. And just because the same person brings it to our attention doesn't mean we get to ignore it. We have to follow our rules. Because if we don't follow our rules, why should citizens? So that's my position on it, and that's why I'm asking if a delay anyway endangers our police or would cause the bid to go away.
So just touch base with the chief, and the answer is no, it wouldn't impact our bid for these vehicles.
I would then ask for it to be delayed until we can get this answered.
The request is to continue the item to our next meeting. Okay. Is there a second? Okay. That takes care of that. Richard, any other concluding comments, please?
No, that's it. I wasn't suggesting to delay the bid. I was just reminding the city council that I brought this issue up a couple years ago, and as I was doing the research, I ran across it again, and this just happened to be an acquisition on the agenda. So I thought it was curious that it seems pretty unambiguous, and the city attorney's response was, well, you know what, we do that in all other instances other than public projects, but that's not been my experience. So if the municipal code is cumbersome and burdensome, then rather than ignoring it, I think the proper process is to change the municipal code. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, with that understanding then, and the abstentions, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar as submitted? Been moved by Councilman Vaccaro. Is there a second, please? Councilman Bertani, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Opposed. Okay, 4-1. Thank you very much. We turn then to new business, item number 10, Madam Clerk.
Item 10, items of concern for Mr. Battersby, and our presenter is Assistant City Attorney Laura, sorry, I just gave you.
I got a promotion.
Assistant City Manager Laura Sneidman.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. It's actually been about 3 years now, almost exactly that, when there have been quite a number of issues that arose primarily from a couple of development projects from the Park and Ride lot and from the Popeyes. And over the past couple of years, we've all been working together to try to come to resolution and solutions. Mr. Battersby has been making sure that we're doing our best work possible. We're trying to provide answers to questions and, again, some solutions to that. And we're at a point tonight where we actually need your insight and your direction to provide that resolution and that direction to Mr. Battersby and to our staff so we can move forward on these items. We have a number of different people here tonight who can answer questions for you from the staff. And what we've done is we've summarized, to the best of our understanding, half a dozen issues that we think are still outstanding, that again, we need this direction from you all on. And we have another half a dozen items that Mr. Battersby specifically requested during a public comment period. And so what I would recommend, if you have speakers cards, we have additional information. I'm guessing you want to hear that information. And then what I would recommend is that I would come back up and we would go through each of these one by one so you could provide that direction. The staff report summarizes what the issue is, and we've provided both a recommendation and alternatives wherever we could identify those alternatives.
We'll follow that recommendation. We have 2 requests to speak cards. We'll begin with Richard Battersby, please, to be followed by Kathy Battersby.
And we have, he would like his wife to go first, and if that's okay with you, Mayor, and we have been able to work out our IT issues thanks to our great media services staff.
Mrs. Battersby, please.
Mayor, City Council members, my name is Kathy Battersby, and yes, Richard Battersby is my husband. And it will be 24 years next month. As you know, this is my first time coming up to speak. I'm usually in the back. I'm either at home watching it on the television, or I'm outside taking photos. So most of the photos that you're gonna see is actually me taking photos of right in my area where I live. So the only thing that I wanted to get into, because Richard can cover everything. He's the one that knows the codes. He's the one that brings up the codes. So I can't address that. All I can do is what I see from all the emails back and forth. Once the codes are addressed, then there's always an issue of interpretation. So every code that's brought to the table, it's always questioned by interpretation, or it's followed up by another code. So what I want to bring forward is that when I received this paper, and it was pretty much as the Battersby's versus the city of Fairfield, well, then I'm obligated to stand up here today. So with that, I took one part out that I wanted to address, and something that I was not aware of until Friday night. And just so you know, I manage a branch, a bank, and I had several team members that were evacuated all week, deploying team members, because I work in Napa. I have many customers coming in that lost a lot of their homes, and a lot of people had nothing. And I do want to thank the Fairfield Fire Department. They did a great job, wonderful job, made me feel secure when I couldn't get on the road. I'm looking out for my own home and looking out for my team members. So I just wanted to make sure that I say thank you to the Fairfield Fire Department. So my question to the city manager is, this paperwork says that the fence that we all been talking about, my fence, it was built on the property in 1970 is what this paper said. I had no idea, because the house was built in the 1980s. So I need someone to explain to me, the fence was put up in the 70s, and then the home was built around the fence in the 80s. So I need that clarified for me. And also, come to find out, in this paper, it says that the fence is on the city's property and not my property. So my question is, whose fence is it? Is it the city's or is it mine? Thank you. Oh, one more thing, I'm sorry. Just so you do know, and I know, David, you understand that I have been trying for years to get that 50-50 neighborhood fenced with the city, but every year that I contacted the city, it was always the funds was not available. Call back in 6 months, call back next year, and then maybe the funds might be available then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Battersby. Mr. City Manager?
So I think Dave Feinstein, it might be best to talk about the fence in terms of it being on city property versus private property. And in terms of the timing, yeah, you may be best to also talk about your research and analysis.
Yeah, good evening. Dave Feinstein, Planning Division Manager. I don't know exactly when the house was built. The fence was approved in the 1970s. The fence was approved as a part of the subdivision, which was in December of 1976. Subsequently, it may have been in the 1980s that the house was built. So the fence could have been built in the 80s along with the house, or it could have been built earlier when that subdivision was first approved and the first houses were built. Don't know exactly when the fence was built. Regarding the location of the fence, today staff did some further research. The fence, I can't say definitively if that fence was built on the property line in the right-of-way or not, but we took a little closer look at the the improvement plans for that subdivision, and the improvement plans show the fence and the property line supposed to be right at the back of the sidewalk. So my best guess would be that the fence is right on that property line right now. The issue that was raised as a part of the staff report is that the original documents that were approved for that subdivision showed the fence being located, I think it was 5.5 feet behind the sidewalk. So it raised some question, where was that fence supposed to be? 5.5 feet behind the sidewalk or right behind it? So there's some discrepancy between different documents that were approved at different points, but ultimately it does appear that that fence is on the property line, right at the back of the sidewalk.
That mean it's a good neighbor fence, David?
That's how we would classify it, yes. Yes.
And Richard, how much time are you requesting, please?
I'm going to guess it's about 7 minutes, but I'm not sure. I have several short clips of the diesel vehicle, the noise sources, because I feel that even though there have been numerous emails back and forth, the staff report is indicating the predominant noise in the area is from the freeway traffic, which I think the videos clarify this beyond a shadow of a doubt, and also show that it's coming from multiple sources. It's not just the street, it's vehicles in the park and ride, it's vehicles at Staples, it's the delivery vehicle at Popeyes. So if just bear with me.
Richard, we'll give you 10 minutes then, okay?
Well, that should be perfect.
Okay, thank
and
you.
I apologize for tacking this on to the end here. There's that municipal code on purchasing, by the way. This is, well, let me jump in here real quick. I think I already introduced myself. I don't like the format that this is in. I've hoped to have a discussion with staff, and I kind of thought that's what we were working towards when David directed the meeting with the staff on site. I thought the on-site meeting was valuable in that staff could actually see the lay of the land and see the fence, see the difference, the contrast between the other homes that are protected by a 10 to 12-foot sound wall, and our home, which is the only property directly exposed to these developments, has only a 6-foot high standard fence. But beyond that, when we had the on-site meeting, one of the first questions I asked is, hey, what's the goal of this meeting? And I couldn't get an answer to that, so I thought that was a little bit odd. And then I also asked, well, are you aware of what the noise thresholds are for residential areas? And I got a response in the negative, and I thought that was a little concerning, seeing how we've been talking about these things for a couple of years, and we were trying to work together. I felt like I was put into a group of people who didn't really know why they were there or what the objective was. So I don't think that meeting was very productive, and since then, that was in June, it's been 3 months. This staff report, agenda report, was kind of developed in a vacuum. I had inquired a couple of times, hey, what's going on? You need further information. I didn't really get a response, so what you're seeing is a staff report prepared by, I'm not really sure who, I'm not really sure based on what, but you can see just based on the item my wife just brought up, staff report says, hey, it looks like the fence is in the right-of-way. Well, guess now that we know it isn't, there are still unanswered questions. The fence, the PUD that Mr. Feinstein referenced, it requires the bike lane. And I didn't even know any of this stuff until we were trying to get the city to work with us on the fence. I had to go back and do Public Record Act requests because our fence is different than other fences in the development. Our fence is what's referred to as a park and trail fence. It's a fence that's specifically designed, required by the city. It's different than the other parts of the subdivision because it's adjacent to the bike trail. And so I thought, wow, here's some further proof. My old fence, now I know why it's different. There's supposed to be bike trails, bike lanes on this city property, which I think also raises an issue as far as the fence responsibility, which is kind of what this dispute's been about. We have severe noise problems. I'm going to get to that here shortly that didn't occur before the development took place. That's both the Park and Ride and the Popeyes. Now, the Park and Ride's kind of a unique situation because the city came in and they just did that in the darkness of night. We came out, go to work one morning, there's construction fences up with signs. It wasn't communicated to the community. That's why I've asked the questions about the zoning PF, public facility zoning designation, that the other city facilities have. The Red Top Park and Ride, the Fairfield Transportation Center, those are all zoned PF. So my question is, why wasn't the Oliver Road project rezoned to PF? And the city's answer is, well, because it didn't have to be. I suspect that the answer is more tied to they didn't want to rezone that property PF, which would have been the logical thing to do, because that requires public notice, that requires a public hearing, and there could have been delays to the project. The city was trying to spend about $900,000 of federal funding. They had a tight timeline, so I totally get that. But by not changing the zoning to be consistent with the other city actions, they eliminated that portion of due process, which is the public notice and the public's opportunity to comment. The property, although commercial, was previously an auto dealership inventory lot. Those were the vehicles that are just parked. They're brand new for sale. There's no in and out traffic. It went from that overnight and went to 180, 167 space Park and Ride with vehicles in and out 24 hours a day. We have heavy duty diesel traffic. You'll see some photos and some video. And also the Popeyes facility, not only do they have their deliveries with these Class 8 tractor trailers, they also have customers. I'm talking about tractor trailers coming into the residential area, illegally parking next to my home, leaving the engine running while they go to get food at Popeyes. None of this happened before the development. And it's been an ongoing issue of concern. And later on, I'm going to go into this, but during the Planning Commission, city staff, Brian Miller, who was the project planner, the question came up from the Planning Commission, how are you going to supply this Popeyes? Now, I'm concerned about big trucks. Brian Miller's response, it's all on public record. I'll bring a video of it down here soon. He said, no, there will be no deliveries with big trucks. They're only going to deliver with small trucks. So, I mean, right off the bat, there's issues with that because we're the ones that have to deal with it. And I've been to several Planning Commission meetings. We've got some new commissioners. I kind of like some of the things Commissioner McDonald says, but what I'm concerned by is he says people have to trust the process. I'm telling you, you can't trust the process because when you say, okay, we understand, we're going to work through these things later. We found out there is no mechanism for resolving noise issues in the city of Fairfield. I mean, you can call the police about a noisy party, but they don't have a mechanism if you have ongoing noise issues. There was not an issue to resolve odor complaints. Guess what? Next to Popeyes, what do you think we smell all day, every day? Fried chicken. Well, there wasn't a formal process. We had found that out through the Public Record Act. And if there's traffic issues, guess what? There's no way for you to address them following after the fact either. So it's a concern. I'm going to get to these videos in a minute. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I intended to stick to a much tighter timeline. I think the fence issue, understanding the uncertainty, even though there was information presented in the staff report, which we've now found is contradictory, I don't see how a decision can possibly be made on the fence because there's still questions. The PUD specifically directed those bike lanes to be put in the staff report, and this is news to me. Now, evidently, a subsequent subdivision tentative approval from the Planning Commission that omitted the bike lane somehow is being considered to trump that PUD, which, by the way, was a city council decision. City council, specific condition of development. Now we hear that a subsequent subdivision map by the planning commission that possibly omitted the bike lanes, that means the bike lanes don't go in. I don't think so. I think that's the wrong answer. We need to engage in the discussion. There's clearly, I mean, we can work together and find a viable solution, but in order to do that, we have to communicate together. And it can't be one-sided, an email, I'm going to respond to you, here's this, I'm going to develop a 9-page staff report and dump it on you Friday night. Now you got to show up on Tuesday ready to go over point by point because city staff is putting the burden on the city council now. Now they want you to make a decision on these things. I don't think you have enough information on the fence. I don't think you have enough information on the bike lane. The city's recommendation on the illegal parking, I love the red curb idea. Wonderful idea, very inexpensive, fantastic. Adding the 3 additional signs, if you really want to do it, great. I don't think it's going to make any difference. I've got photos, you can see the trucks, they're parked right next to the existing no parking signs. I just don't think we need to spend the money on additional parking signs. The sound wall fencing, again, I'm going to show you that the predominant noise generator is the freeway that city staff is claiming. That's absolutely not correct. As far as the location of the sound wall, I just want to remind the city council and city staff, I first proposed that the city put the wall on the park and ride, which is one of the requirements in municipal code. When you have a non-residential development that's adjacent or abuts residential property, you're required to build a wall. I said, great, put the wall up, put it on the park and ride. Well, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was George or someone else said, well, the whole idea with the park and ride is we want visibility. We don't want a wall. We don't, that could cause crime to occur there. I said, great, you don't want to put the wall on the park and ride, put it on my property line. I don't care. That's kind of how the discussion got there. Later on, the city evolved its position to, well, we're exempt from municipal code, so we don't want to entertain this issue anymore. So, yeah, I mean, it seems kind of silly to talk about gift of public funds. We can't put anything over there to benefit the Battersbys. Well, you guys have really, let me be generous here, given the benefit of the doubt to Cameron Najumi and the Popeyes. I'm telling you right now, that's a gift of public funds. They're deriving the benefit of that variance that they didn't apply for to this day. That's $5,500 out of the city coffers. But I asked to use the same methodology, and I'm told I have to pay that, and there's no mechanism for the city to waive a fee. Well, there is. It's the city just doesn't apply it in the first place. And the problem is they don't forget or make mistakes on applications for everybody. This only happens for certain parties. The city has never once, this is what my wife was alluding to, in all the issues that have come up, there have been numerous interpretations of municipal code. Not one time has any city staff interpreted a municipal code to the benefit of the resident. Now, I understand you may not like me, but I'm a taxpayer. You have to put aside the personal opinions. I deserve to be treated fairly. My wife deserves to be treated fairly. We all do. You cannot tell me out of all those issues we brought up, not once has Mr. Battersby been right. Oh, except for the park and ride, which was, what was the issue? Again, it's the landscaping setback. So the park and ride landscaping setback, the city project did not meet code. The Popeyes landscaping project did not meet code. Any of you that are following the Osh development, 1500 Oliver Road, guess what? The drawings by that architect also did not meet city municipal code for setback. And I give city staff credit. They caught it and they noted it in the staff report, but there seems to be a trend here. So you have developers that sort of fudge the line and they get away with these things. When a resident has impacts caused by this, I ask for a solution to help me mitigate the problems, and I get nothing but a brick wall. Well, and maybe that's not a good analogy because right now I'm not getting any wall. I also want to point out, like my wife said...
Richard, you're running out of time.
Uh-oh. Well, I better get to the videos.
Wait. I'm sorry?
Well, anyway, just trust me.
All right, Richard, his 10 minutes are up, aren't they?
Done?
Done.
So if anybody wants to see videos, they're really cool. These are all the illegally parked trucks. There's a decibel meter, shows it's at 70 decibels. That's Popeyes delivery trucks. Those are supposed to be small according to the Planning Commission. Here's the traffic situation. Look at that.
Richard, I'm sorry. You're out of time, sir.
But, trust me, it's all there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And our next speaker, final speaker, will be Mr. George Gwynn, please. Mr. Gwynn.
Good evening once again. I'm simply amazed. Mr. Battersby is very articulate, and he has a very excellent presentation. You guys better be very happy that he's a reasonable person, because if he was really like a lot of people in the state are, he would have the meanest attorney he could find knocking on your door and saying you're sued. I think that you guys are really missing the boat by not trying to work with him, because he's not trying to be very difficult to work with. He's trying to work with you, and he doesn't get the feeling that you're trying to work with him, and that's the feeling I'm getting from watching from the audience. And I hope I'm wrong about that, but that's the feeling I get. And I really would like to see you guys try to work with him, because I think it would be better for both sides if you do, as opposed to he said, you say. So I really hope you guys will get together and try to work something out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Laura, would you come back, please?
Thank you. So again, we have a half a dozen items that we have summarized to the best of our ability as we understand them, and I would like to go through that set first, if that works for the council. So the first one is a collection of items that all relate to the truck and the noise and the emissions and the bike lanes. And what staff has recommended is that we take 2 additional measures, trying as best as possible to signal to the trucks that that is not a workable solution for them, and try and make that more abundantly clear. So I'm seeking direction on that recommendation.
Discussion, colleagues? Councilman Moy?
How are we going to make it abundantly clear?
So the 2 recommendations are that we add and potentially relocate the no parking signs, and we also add red curb that isn't currently there.
Any objections? Okay. So a thumbs up? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Staff will
Thank you.
move forward with that. The second one is the sound wall and the fencing, and we are recommending that we move forward with the good neighbor fencing that you all have heard about a number of times before.
Now, is that going to be the 6-foot fence, or is it going to be
Yes,
taller?
it would be the 6-foot fence.
6-foot fence.
Correct.
And that cost again, please?
That cost is
$1,800?
approximately $1,800 is our best get, because what the city does is it provides the materials, and the homeowner does need to do the work to install that.
And that fence could be installed up to 7 feet in height.
With the additional
be, yes.
foot of.
Any objections?
Okay.
Okay.
We
Direction
will
on
move
that one,
forward
too?
with that also. We also have summarized again the issue that has come up multiple times about the landscaping surrounding Popeyes. You all had an earlier council meeting on that, and we don't believe that there is anything further to do on this item.
But we won't
Vice
do,
Mayor?
yes, we won't use average methodology
I will
anywhere in
let
any
the
more
planning manager or the city manager
documents.
speak to that, but it is unlikely. Would the city attorney like to comment?
No, that's not going to be used in the future.
Thank you.
It
Which is
is
different from-
verboten henceforth. Okay?
Yes, and again, one thing, and we've had discussions at the staff level here about being very careful on interpretations. And, we do have to interpret the code, pretty regularly, but if there really is a deviation from the express language of the code, then we need to either amend the code, or there should be a variance applied for in those cases, and that is going to be the direction going forward.
Any disagreement? Okay. Laura, continue, please.
The fourth item is electrical vehicle chargers in the park and ride lot. And we are recommending that as we are able to, both in terms of our staff resources and time, that we look for grant funding to put one in, but we cannot guarantee a time frame in which that might happen.
I have a question.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
But if this is just a temporary lot, why should we spend the money and the time and effort to do this?
So that is part of the reasoning in here about why we wouldn't be expending city funds today, like for instance, general fund money to do that. We would be seeking grant funds, and if we were able to secure those, we could come back and seek your direction if that is what you wanted to spend that money on. Or we could take no action at all.
I'm not, just because it's, George Gwynn will say this, is taxpayer dollars, whether it's our money or somebody else's money.
Correct, it's still taxpayer
And
dollars.
it's just a temporary lot. I'm not really interested in having an electric charger there. For the cost, it's pretty expensive.
Any disagreement, colleagues?
Well, I agree with what Chuck just said. I also want to say that I think as a city council, we need to look at the policy across the city with EVs, because I don't think we should be giving away free electricity. We don't give away free gas. And so even though, we like to encourage people to use electrical vehicles, you have to remember that the electricity comes from somewhere, and yes, it could be coal. Yes, it can be. So understand that, but we shouldn't be giving it away. It should be, I believe, people should have to pay for it.
Thank you. And I know that that is something that the Public Works Department has been discussing as we look at additional areas where those chargers might be installed. Thank you.
Any disagreement? Okay, Laura, next one,
Okay.
please.
The next one is an accessible public route to Popeyes, and we have our folks saying that the route conforms with the state code, and it has accurately been installed.
Any disagreement? Okay. Laura, thank you. Move on, please.
And lastly, in this first group of items, we have the zoning of the park and ride lot, and the recommendation is that we don't rezone, again, because of the temporary nature as mentioned previously, and it would potentially impede the property if we wanted to do something in the future with it.
Agreed? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next group of items are items that were specifically requested during July 25th public comment. And that is a third-party investigation of Popeyes. What I would recommend on these is maybe I'll just kind of mention each one, and then I'll just do them as a group, and you can let me know if you have any specific direction that's different than in the staff report. Is that a good idea?
Sure.
Okay. So one of them is a third-party investigation of the Popeyes project approval and code violation resolution process. This is something that we believe has previously been decided not to pursue. A request for investigation into gift of public funds about the variances that were granted to Popeyes. And again, there's no recommendation on moving forward because that project has been approved. The third one is investigation of the origins and claims made by staff of an averaging methodology. This is the one where you've had the previous council meeting and we discussed just a few moments ago. The fourth one is accountability and discipline of all city staff who were not truthful. And these statements have been previously reviewed, and it was determined that no additional action is warranted other than anything that has already been taken. The fifth one is admission of wrongdoing, and it was determined that no admissions or additional actions are warranted at this time. And the final one is bringing the facilities into full compliance with the city code. And again, this one is one that we believe we covered previously in the staff report.
Any disagreement? Councilman Moy?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From the city attorney, could you please tell me why it is, even though a project has been approved, we admitted that we made mistakes with the averaging methodology and using that term and whatever staff did there. Is it true that a variance would have been needed, and would it have cost what Mr. Battersby has related to us?
Well, looked at this at the time. I believe our conclusion would have been that a variance should have been the method used, but again, the method that was used was a averaging approach, and as explained in earlier reports, it was how the building was positioned to be somewhat further away from the homes, and that
Right.
resulted in less than the full 15 feet being uniform. But that was what was shown on the plans approved by the Planning Commission. So this is where the problem comes in trying to change that now, is that the building was built now in accordance with the plans. There was some issue about the parapet on the roof that was corrected. But the actual location of the building and the landscaping was built as shown on the plans. It was not appealed to the council, which was a problem. But then, and also there's no lawsuit filed within the time frame within which litigation would have to be filed. So that meant the decision made by the Planning Commission is final. And that's why we've advised the council on several occasions, you cannot now reopen that. And the second problem was the building's built. And again, had the building not been built, there may have been a different avenue of how to try to approach that. But you take the combination of the statute of limitations expiring to challenge the approval, and the fact that the building was built in accordance with the plans, leaves us in a situation, there's no remedy now to change that situation.
Okay, so the variance application, if we'd done things properly, they should have applied for one, yes, if things were done properly.
Yes, I mean, if we're looking at this now, we would say, yes, that is how that should have been done.
Okay.
And likewise, in the future, if we encounter this situation in the future and that's identified as a deviation like this, the recommendation would be that it should be done by a variance.
Okay, and so legally, this is not a gift of public funds?
No, and it's not because there wasn't a variance granted. You know, I think the argument is being made here that effectively the Planning Commission granted a variance and the applicant was not charged a fee for that. That was not even ever thought about. When it was done, the staff approach at that point in time was to, again, try to average the landscaping and approve it as part of an overall plan of development. And so the variance was never considered. And it was just how it was done at that point in time.
Okay.
Yeah, that could have been raised as an issue again and before the council or in litigation. And that would have been ultimately a court to decide that issue down the road, but that never happened. And all the time for that to happen now has expired.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. One last thing. You said it has been decided that nobody lied or did that. Who decided that?
So there are a number of different steps, and I didn't say that. I said that all appropriate actions have been taken as by the appropriate reviewing body. So for instance, the city manager is responsible for staff and you all are responsible for council and for the city manager and city attorney.
I just want it to be clear and on the record that I did not review any of this or make any decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, colleagues? You have direction then?
We have direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, and this is specifically to Mr. Battersby. This has been going on, this obviously started 3.5 years ago. And you were right in some areas as far as the terminology. Probably the biggest thing that has held us up, when I say us, city and you, is interpretation of codes, and your wife, I guess, kind of hit on it. But I think in all fairness, I think we told you that you can go to the grand jury, you go to the DA, you could hire a civil attorney. I mean, we weren't trying to buffalo you on anything. I do know that your stick-to-itiveness got the trees planted as a barrier. And the issue with the fence, we discussed that a couple of years ago, and by code, we can't raise it to 8 feet because you back up to the commercial side. And I know there was discussion over that, but were we to grant a variance, we'd have to change the whole code for the entire city. City council doesn't have that authority. And I want to make sure that that was clear a couple of years ago and it's clear today. And then the bike lane with the PUD and the bike lanes, that's a go nowhere. Those got changed from the 70s. And for us to come back and say, now you got to do what was done in the 70s required for a bike lane, you talk about a waste of money. So it's kind of a give and take. But I want to make sure, and when I said over 500 emails from you, and that's true, and probably a lot of them were deserved back and forth, but the public records requests that you're entitled to ask for involves a lot of staff time, a tremendous amount of staff time. And if we continue to go back and forth, I don't know I don't know how we can settle this. I'll give you average methodology. I don't want to hear it again. You know, I'll give you that. But everything that we've accomplished here tonight, hopefully you can agree, either A, to disagree, and you can take separate action outside of the city, or say, actually, city staff listened. You're going to get a fence out of the deal, which was, that's a couple $1,000. The no parking signs. Now, here comes the enforcement of it. If you have a loud truck and you call the police department, they're not, God love them, but I don't know if they're going to run right out there. So we have a discrepancy is where's the noise coming from? Is it the freeway or is it Oliver Road? So it's a give and take. I understand, I appreciate what you've been through. I think the entire council does, and hopefully we can at least put this to bed for a while. Mr. Battersby, thank you for listening, sir. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Battersby, I hope that you'll continue to be so supportive of all the things that happen in Fairfield. Thank you very much, you and your wife. Thank you. We turn then to item number 11, colleagues. Madam Clerk, if you would, please.
Presentation of report to the City Council of the City of Fairfield concerning the golf course contracts.
Our presenter is our Public Works Director, George Hicks. George?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm pleased to give you this update tonight on golf. By way of a little background, the city, as you know, operates 2 championship municipal golf courses, and the city operates those golf courses under contracts. The city contracts separately for golf course operations and food, beverage, and banquet facilities. And city has contracted with Kemper Sports for golf course operations and maintenance since 2003, and with Sports Restaurants for food, beverage, and banquet operations since 2009. In 2015, we had contracts expiring, had some public discussions and several meetings related to golf courses. At the time, we were concerned with a steady decline in golf course performance, and some discussions ensued out of that. In the end, the City Council authorized in February 2016 extensions of those 2 existing contracts, but they did it for a limited term, and a limited term of 2 years. And that term was limited due to those concerns over performance. And to address the concerns, those contract extensions had performance measures in there for each operators to meet to improve performance. And the contracts also were worded such that if those performance measures were met, the contracts would be extended for 5 additional years. And that's what brings us here tonight. So final update on the 2 years and consideration of the 5 years. Staff has appeared before council and given you periodic updates over the last couple years on the performance of these facilities, and I wanted to give you a final update on performance here tonight now that that trial period has ended. So I've just got some slides here that are copies of what's in your staff report, but I thought that might be beneficial to the audience. The first I wanted to look at is sports restaurants. Sports restaurants had 2 performance metrics in their contracts. One was for weddings, banquet, and tournament business, and the goal was to increase those by 8% per year for 2 successive years, as is shown in the contract or on the slide that they have exceeded that goal. It had 11.7% in the first year and 13.7% in the second year. The other area performance for sports restaurants was grill and cart sales. That was the performance measure was a 3% increase each year, and they made a 4.4% increase in the first year and a 5.3% increase in this last year. So they have exceeded the performance measures for both the metrics and their contract. The second was Kemper Sports, and with one exception, Kemper Sports has achieved their performance measures as well. And the one place they failed, I consider that to be excusable, as I explained in the staff report, but I'll go over that here in a minute. The first was rounds per playable day. We wanted to see a 2% increase. Pleased to report at a 2.7% increase in that area. I'm going to skip tournament revenue here for a minute. One of the things that we introduced in the contracts was rounds per playable day, and as I explained a couple of years ago, by way of refresher, is golf is heavily impacted by rain, the threat of rain, if there's a storm coming, people don't make reservations for tee times. They don't play as nearly as much in the rain. So in order to be fair and have a level playing field, good years versus bad years, we put a definition in the contract of rounds per playable day. But one of the things, I'll take the blame for this, is we applied rounds per playable day to overall play, but we didn't apply the concept of playable days to any of the other metrics. So all the metrics, whether it's tournament play, women's rounds, youth, they're all affected by weather equally, but the contract didn't give consideration for Kemper for weather for those other things. So youth rounds, in spite of that, we're at 5%, they got 63%. Youth revenue was up 189%. Women's golf rounds up 21.4%, and revenue up 12%. So they just greatly exceeded all the performance metrics except the tournament revenue. And again, why I outlined in the staff report, I consider that failure there as excusable is that it doesn't consider rounds per playable day. And the other thing is, if you remember back to the staff report, one of the things that we were very concerned about and pleased to give a positive report on this time was the cooperation between and the coordination between those two vendors. There just was, in our opinion, a lack of coordination and cooperation between those two. Since we last talked, there's been great cooperation. And in the staff report that we presented to you 2 years ago, we not only had the metrics, but we identified some actual performance measures that we wanted them to weekly coordination meetings, advertising, some specific things. Both the vendors have done both of those that we believe will result in improved tournament play. It's just, a victim of the terrible year we had weather-wise. So that's really it for the performance metrics. And anyway, based on the positive results, we have started negotiations with each of the vendors on extended contracts. The revisions are fairly minor, but some of the highlights we're working on include increases in revenue sharing, increased responsibility for facilities maintenance, and modifications to the performance measures to reflect a longer 5-year term. They were extremely ambitious and I think appropriate for a 2-year contract, but in consideration of the great gains they've had and a 5-year contract, we're looking at some modifications to those. So this is intended as an informational item, but I do want to get council input if you have any for me, and we hope to bring a contract back to you for your consideration in probably the December timeframe.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Vice Mayor? Okay, if you would, please. Yeah, we do, but I'll take these questions first.
Do you want me to go first?
Go first, please.
George, and I want to get into the nuts and bolts a little bit of the contract. Rancho Solano pays about 83 cents a square foot, right?
Okay.
And these are your numbers, I think.
I believe so, yes.
And then Paradise Valley is about $1.94 a square foot. So you look at the gross revenues, right? So you get 9% of gross revenues and 12% of banquet. My question is we own the buildings. Where do we get our money from? Does Kemper write you a check? Does SRI write you a check? When I say you, meaning the city?
No.
You know?
We get the compensation for operating those we get revenues from golf. We pay Kemper a management fee. For sports restaurants, they're basically paying us a proxy for rent, which is the 9% of gross revenues and 12% of banquet sales, which is, I think you correctly stated, averages to about a little over $1 a square foot.
Yeah, it does, and comes out to, I don't know, about $174,000 a year per site. And my question is we've had no competitive bids in 20 years, nothing. But the numbers have stayed the same. Numbers haven't changed. About $3 million from SRI, and about 4.25, I think, from Kemper, give or take. But nothing's changed in at least 20 years. I know rent has gone up. I know property tax has gone up. So then we come back to capital improvements. And I heard you hit on it. Who pays for the stoves, the hoods, the freezers, everything on the inside, us or SRI?
I believe, and somebody correct me on staff if I'm wrong, they pay for the inside of the building and the equipment, and we pay for the shell. We're just kind of They pay for the operations, we're the landlord, so we've got the roof, the ceiling, the walls, but everything inside is the tenant's responsibility.
Because that looks like then that's a change, because I wasn't sure, because it kind of looked like we did. Who pays PG&E, us or them? Do you know?
They do.
I guess what I'm looking at,
believe they
I
do,
guess
yeah.
what I'm looking at is we don't really have contracting officers. And if you were to say, Chuck, I want you to do a contract for this business, I'd scratch my head. And I would actually hire, I hate this word, George, but a consultant, because I don't know anything about marketing. I don't know anything about contracting. How much money are we going to have to give, if you know, to supplement the golf courses this year? Any idea? 300,000, 400,000?
I don't know. I do know in fiscal year 1920, they break even or a little bit of a profit once the bonds are retired.
Right, because I know, was it a year ago, 2 years ago? We wanted to give 4, and you kind of squawked. We ended up giving 300,000. So what I'm looking to do is figure out where, and I don't care whose back we make it on, whether it's SRI, whether it's Kemper, I don't really care. But if things haven't changed and it's been so flat for all these years, that I think that the city deserves to make the money that we should be making. Now, I could be all wet, but I'd like to know the price per square foot of what a restaurant goes for. And I don't have those answers, and I wouldn't expect you to have those answers. But a contracting officer that does this specifically, and whether, and David, maybe you know, whether it's a commercial broker or somebody like that, but to dive into the nuts and bolts of this. And it could be that SRI and Kemper have the best, but I certainly would like to see a competitive bid. It's been so long. I'd like to see some real numbers. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for George before I open it to?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, there are public speakers, right? They're speakers.
Yes,
Okay, I'd like to comment after the speakers.
after the speakers. Okay, fine. Our first speaker will be Ashley Tubb, please, if you'd come forward, to be followed by Bob Fulton.
Good evening to everybody, City Council, Mayor, thank you for having me. For those of you that don't already know me, my name's Ashley Tubb. I'm the General Manager at Legends at Paradise Valley, SRI. And I've been with the company almost 13 years now. And just briefly, you know, I just want to say that I'm so proud to be a part of such a great company and, you know, all of the accomplishments that we've achieved. We have such an amazing staff, supportive, hardworking, you know, and we've increased all of our restaurant sales, our banquet sales, the number of weddings that we have per year has also increased. And, you know, Legends and Kemper have worked together seamlessly, or in a seamless effort to, you know, host tournaments and promotions. And we've really just done a great job with accomplishing all of the things that we needed to. We've achieved and exceeded all of our benchmarks and goals that were asked of us. And thank you to the city council members for, you know, making a thoughtful and a good business decision 2 years ago to have us there. And I'm just looking forward to, you know, the future and excited to see what the next 5 years have to bring. And there's just so much good that's coming out of the company, and I'm proud to be a part of it. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Mr. Fulton, please, to be followed by Dan Bieber.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, city staff. Thank you guys for your time and your efforts here. I'm from Walnut Creek. What I do for my recreational time is play golf, and I visit your facilities frequently, along with many, many others in Northern California. 2 years ago, I came to this meeting as you were discussing going to a single operator model for the golf course, and I spoke adamantly against that. And I couldn't be any more adamant this time against it, because you will give up service, you will give up the quality of the experience, you will not have a food and beverage operator that is a specialist in just food and beverage. You're going to have a wonderful, mediocre golf course. You talk about the revenues being flat for 20 years, not much changing. If you look at the golf industry, 20 years ago, you probably had half the amount of golf courses that there are now competing with your golf courses. And a number of those have closed. We've seen facilities that cannot operate, have not been able to increase, and have decreased actually and gone out of business. So I commend you on the decision you guys made 2 years ago as I was here at that meeting listening to you. You set a bunch of performance measures for the operators to achieve, and you gave them an agreement that says if you do this in 2 years, we're going to renew your lease. And this is our word to you. And now you have the opportunity to show if you have the integrity to stand up to your agreement and your words that you have given an operator who has now gone out and put a lot of capital into the improvement of their facility. I understand that you want more revenue and you're looking for more funds in different areas, but you know, I'd like to be able to use you elected officials as a good example for my children, because we have numerous elected officials right now who are not good examples. And I'd like to be able to say, yes, the Fairfield City Council had the integrity to stand beside themselves for the decision that they made 2 years ago, and will go forward with it. So I'm hoping you guys make a good decision here. You don't backtrack and try and go into an area that you said you weren't going to. So hopefully you're a good example for my kids. Thank you for your time, and good luck.
Thank you. Dan, please, to be followed by Michael Olson. Use either one, gentlemen.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Dan Bieber with Sports Restaurants, my partner George Marshall, and Rich Cessna, our General Manager of Operations out at the golf course with Kemper Sports. Sports Restaurants, Kemper, our ownership, our management, and our staff wish to thank you for the opportunity that you gave us 2 years ago. The decision made to give us an opportunity to attain some benchmarks and achieve some goals with the reward of a 5-year contract was not only a good decision, but I feel it was a wise decision, as all of us do. We felt then, and we still feel today, you know, that our entire team is proud of our company, and we're proud of all of the accomplishments we've made in the last 24 months. We've had one of the wettest winters, one of the hottest summers on record, and we were still able to attain and achieve and even surpass the benchmarks that were given to us by the city. We've developed a strong working team with Kemper, and we have continued to invest resources, energy, ideas, and time into these buildings and the business. The result has been a sound increase in our revenue, which adds more to the city's bottom line as well. We now look forward to the extension that's been agreed upon. And I would just like to say, in reference, Vice Mayor Tim, to your comments, that as far as rent space goes, we've had some independent third-party studies done for another operation of ours, and the rent calculations for both Paradise Valley and Rancho Solano are the highest in the industry compared to everything in Northern California. I also want to let you know that part of the study we had done had to do with one operator versus two operators. There's 36 full-size 18-hole golf courses in Northern California, regulation size. 58% of those are operated by 2 or more operators. And the majority of those are 2 or more simply because of the restaurant quality or style or size that you need that expertise to operate at a golf course and succeed. So I have that information if anybody would like to see it. I also would like to state that, you know, you made a comment about the square footage in the buildings, and I believe industry to industry is different. In our industry, if you were to charge by the square footage, we wouldn't be open more than a couple of weeks if you looked at the way other industries charge for their rental space. Yeah, not at a mall. And again, flat, we have been flat. Golf in the last 8 or 9 years is down 40% across the country. And for us to be flat and continue some growth at all is pretty amazing in this industry. And we're proud of what we've accomplished. We are happy to continue our relationship with the city of Fairfield, and we look forward to the next 5 years.
Thank you, Dan. George? Okay. Rich, do you? Okay. That it? I'll bring it back for council comments, please. Mr. Vice Mayor? Oh, okay. Yeah, sir, go ahead.
I was next.
No, we'll take you.
Michael Olson. I too was here a year and a half, 2 years ago, and listened to the debate at the time as to whether to continue the contract or to change it under various circumstances. And as you were debating it, some of the reasoning behind discontinuing the contract with the current operators, I disagreed with. And I was happy, however, to see that you, I think in some of your minds, made a compromise and went ahead with this last 2-year schedule, adding a number of benchmarks. I thought that was very smart. I thought it was a great compromise. And now you find yourselves in the position where everything that you desired back then has now been met or exceeded. And as per the amendment, if all of those things happened as they did, then the Public Works Director was authorized at his own discretion to pen a 5-year contract. So frankly, and I want this to continue to be a kumbaya and everybody to get together and enjoy each other and go on and on. But I don't understand even why we're here. The report, you get the quarterly reports. You've known that these numbers have gone in the direction that they've gone now for, I don't know how many quarters, 4 or 5. So per all of that, the Public Works Director should be approaching the 2 operators with a 5-year contract. I'm sort of at a loss as to why this is being, and I sense that this is being debated again, that this is just not a report. This is a debate about whether what you wanted to happen has happened and whether you want to continue with that. And I think that that's very disconcerting. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager, Mr. Olson, if you'd stay for a moment, please.
Mr. Olson, that was a fair question. I just want to communicate. So one of the promises that we made back 2 years ago was that we would routinely report back to council on the progress, and so that's really the basis for this. Is our Public Works Director mentioned, was we wanted to do a concluding report on the 2-year benchmarks that we talked about we wanted to be accountable for.
Yeah, I understand that, and I agree. However, I just sense particularly from Councilman Tim, that this whole dynamic is changing and it's reverting back to where it was 2 years ago. And with that, I'm very disenchanted if it does in fact go in that direction.
Thank you, sir. Now, Councilman McCarroll.
Are we done with the speakers?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, first of all, I know 2 years ago when we were here, there was a lot of talk about Kemper and SRI, not working well together, not getting along. So, we talked about it, and it was brought up, okay, let's give it a 2-year trial. We sent benchmarks then. We said if they meet the benchmarks, if the cooperation improved, then we would seriously look at the 5-year extension. It looks to me like, looking at the numbers, that it's a no-brainer. I mean, they have met the benchmarks. And, and let me just say one thing. I respect the opinion of all my fellow colleagues up here. Okay, so I'm not going to be detrimental to anybody. But I have to say that what I've seen, the cooperation, just the fact that that SRI and Kemper came up here together, sort of a show of, unity that they both want to continue. I think SRI does a very good job. I think Kemper does a very good job. I'm glad to see the cooperation over the last couple of years. Now, not everybody's going to agree with me. I understand that. But I think there'll be more people that would agree with me. It's always a tough decision to make when you award somebody a contract. And for the last speaker that spoke, Mr. Olson, right? I think anytime you go to a city council meeting and there's a subject matter, sometimes it does turn into a debate. That's what happens. And I understand what you're saying and you feel strongly about it. But that is the reality of a city council meeting. But I really do feel strongly, I mean, I felt strongly about it 2 years ago to give them another chance, okay, to give both organizations another chance. I'm glad we did. I'm glad that it did come out that because of the weather, maybe the tournaments were down a little bit and everything else was up. But I don't really see any other direction we can take right now but to direct staff to work on the contract for the 5 years. So that's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor, right, for now.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, you have another comment?
Yeah, I actually have a couple. I certainly don't mean that this is SRI against Kemper, but I certainly don't apologize for wanting a competitive bid with taxpayer money involved. I don't apologize for that 1 second. If you remember, I was for a single vendor last time, but it has nothing to do with SRI or Kemper. I know probably most of these people in here, and they're fine people, has nothing to do with that. It's for the greater good of the city. And what I asked for is a competitive bid, and you shake your head no, and I just don't understand why we would not want to go out and look at something. Can the city protect taxpayers' dollar, since we're going to spend another $300,000 or $400,000 to supplement the city? Golf courses. Now, whether it's SRI or Kemper, single vendor, 2 vendors, I don't really care. I want what is best for the city. In SRI's defense, they've stepped up their game, absolutely. And I haven't been there in a couple of months, but it's nice. I mean, it's very nice. I don't have any issues with that. My issue is it's taxpayer dollars. That's all it is. So it has nothing to do with integrity or anything like that. And yeah, we probably disagree on some things, but that's certainly okay. And I appreciate you bringing it up. I mean, let's see where it goes. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm happy and impressed with everything that Kemper and SRI did to keep their word to the taxpayers of this city and the citizens here. They're working together, as we've all said, seen it. We're looking at the numbers. We know that we're not going to be, in a couple of years, there'll be no more subsidizing. So I am going to keep my word that I give 2 years ago, and that is that I'm going to support the 5-year contract and directing staff to go forward with that. I think that is for the greater good of the city.
Mr. Hicks, before I come to you, let me make a couple of very quick observations. I really appreciate the side-by-side performance measures that you included in the staff report this evening. And one of the most gratifying for me, of course, is the fact that if you take a look at the youth participation in public golf in Fairfield, it is really significant. It's remarkable. And then the other observation is every year we have the Military Recognition Night, and this year it's going to be held at Rancho Solano. That function has been in existence for 41 years, and there are some folks from the East Coast who are here with their Travis counterparts to the Contingency Response Wing. One of them spent some time here when he was a very young officer, and now he's nearing his retirement. And he said, I just can't believe what has happened to these golf courses. And he was referring specifically yesterday to Paradise Valley. And he said, I didn't know. He said, I knew about the golf course, but I didn't know that the Paradise Valley Estates is here now too. And he said, this is where I might want to retire. So, Mr. Hicks, any concluding comments, please?
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
may I ask a
Oh,
couple
I'm
of
sorry.
questions, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, so this 2-year contract includes an option to extend to 5 years, right?
Well, it's
I
actually.
mean, what is the trigger? How does that work? Because what I want to make clear is that there is no legal obligation to extend to the 5 years if the benchmarks are met, because I think that's what I'm hearing from some of the speakers.
Well, the way the contracts were approved 2 years ago provides is that if the benchmarks were met, then there is actually, and that's true by the city, then there is an extension that does occur.
Okay, so to be clear then, this is not an option to extend. Okay, so that shouldn't be in this report. This is not an option to extend. It is, if the benchmarks are met, then a 5-year extension will be granted. Is that correct?
Subject to the terms that are negotiated by the Public Works Director. So it was delegated to the Public Works Director to actually to finalize that a 5-year extension. So it's a little bit of a hybrid here in a way, because it's not that the contract extended on the exact same terms as the prior contract. There was discretion given to the director to actually work with respect to the SRF contract to negotiate revisions to the metrics. And so that's why right now they're having discussions as to how some of those metrics going forward should be revised. And there are other terms now being discussed between the parties to address the operations there. And that was why the Public Works Director has said that he would bring this back to you to finalize and approve that final extension. But this is not a case, if you did, let me put it this way, if you have determined that the metrics have been met, I do not believe you can then open this up now to competitive bidding.
And that is where I'm going with my next question. So based on the performance metrics that have been presented, does this city council have any discretion to not move forward with negotiating a 5-year contract? Do we have discretion or not?
No, at this point, I believe. At this point, what you would need to do is you should be directing the Public Works Director now to finalize the 5-year extension and its terms.
So just to be clear, at this point, based on the performance metrics, does this city council have any discretion not to proceed with negotiating the 5-year contract? Yes or no?
Well, based on the determination that staff has made that the metrics have been met.
Except for one.
Well, except for that one, there is that one item and that is affected by the weather conditions. I believe at this point in time, there is an obligation to go forward with the extension at this point in time. No, at this point in time, it is, again, triggers the negotiation of a 5-year extension. So that's where we are right now.
So the extended agreement would have to be brought before you, and so it doesn't presuppose that you would approve the new agreement.
But at this point, we don't have discretion to open it up to competitive bidding.
That's, I think, is a better way of saying this here, is that just the way this was set up, because the issue was 2 years ago whether you should go to competitive bid. And what the direction of the council was at that point in time was that you decided not to do that, but you were providing for a 2-year time frame to see whether the two parties could work together, and more importantly, whether they would meet performance metrics. And so that's why we're here now. It was up to the director to determine whether the performance metrics were met in his sole discretion. But it was brought back to you so this could be reviewed with you and answer your questions as to whether or not you felt there were issues with respect to performance. But that is at this point in time, I don't believe you can make a decision to open this up to competitive bidding at this point in time. I think you have the freedom now, working through the director, to sit down with the parties to finalize the terms of the extension agreement. And there are discussions here about fine-tuning provisions here, hopefully for the benefit of the city.
So, yeah, and because I understand the vice mayor's position and actually agree with it, because we live in a free market economy, and when you factor out competition, that could be a very kind of scary and dangerous thing to do. So, because competition fuels the marketplace, right? So, I mean, so that's why I'm asking you, basically right now, we have no discretion to open this up to competitive bidding. And I guess that we're basically required contractually to move forward with a 5-year agreement, negotiating, and then any further discussion around the propriety of that agreement would come when you present us with the final contract.
That is correct. And
Okay.
yeah, and so again, there will be room here to talk about terms, and that will be brought to you for your ultimate approval here. And because the way that was worded, actually, there was discretion given to the director to actually even enter into the agreement. But we felt that there are some terms that are going to be discussed between the parties, and those really should come back to you for your final review and approval.
So just for the sake of argument, I mean, could there be a scenario where this contract comes back to City Council for whatever reason has some concerns about some of the provisions? At that point, would council have any discretion to put the contract out to public bid?
Well, what I'd like to do is to see what happens during the negotiations.
Me too.
That director
Yeah,
has.
me too. That's what I'm
And
saying.
at that point, we will advise you at that point
Okay.
as to where we see
Good
that
enough.
the council's discretion would be.
Good enough.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I love it when two attorneys actually can explain something to me. So what, the action that we took a couple of years ago, then basically gave them a 5-year agreement if they met the benchmark. Actually going to be a 7-year agreement 5 years ago. It's kind of like playing poker, kind of like Indian, where I don't see the card and I put it up here and you get to see and then I get to bet. How do we keep from doing that again? Because now we go, let's say we go into contract negotiations. And Pam hit the nail on the head. What if we don't because what gives somebody the incentive to negotiate where, they want to make the most money, we want to make the most money. And, terms of a good negotiation is when everybody walks away a little angry, but you get a deal. I want to make sure I don't know how we can negotiate when they know they're going to get an agreement.
Well, but I think what happened there was.
And I'm not talking about SRI, I'm talking about SRI and Kemper. I'm not picking on you.
I think what the council decided here was that there was concern on how the two parties were working together and whether the performance could be improved. And there were metrics established that they had to aspire to and obtain. And that was going to, and the inducement to do that was to the parties, if you do that, there will be a reward then of you get 5 more years. And that was an inducement for them to make more of an investment into the properties. So that really was the concept there. And so I think at this point in time, my recommendation would be turn it back to the director and to finalize the contracts. And then we'll bring it back and then we'll define for you the scope of your review at that point in time.
2 more comments from colleagues.
Go ahead,
Councilman Moyne?
Look, we made a promise. We are the lawmakers here. If we didn't read it right, our bad. It's up to the people in the city. They rely on us to read those things properly and understand what we're doing. I did, and I stand by it. And, my colleagues, again, I respect them. I respect what they're saying. I'm all about the free market. I see the numbers. I see the benchmarks. I knew what was coming, and it's here. And so let it play.
Councilman Vaccaro?
Right, yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think the explanation that Greg and Pam were talking about, I think it was pretty clear. If the benchmarks are met, then you would begin to negotiate the contract. Obviously, if the contracts came back and we all thought, or the majority of us thought, wait a minute, this isn't good, that wouldn't go through. I don't think it takes away that authority from the city council at all. So I think that's one thing that, needs to be made clear. It's not, obviously the majority of the city council feels one way right now, and I think they will too when the contracts come back. But that doesn't take authority away from the city council at all. So I want to make sure the public understands that. But right now it's obvious that the majority of the city council does feel strongly about negotiating a 5-year contract, coming back and looking at it and voting on it, period. Am I correct? Okay.
Thank you, colleagues. George Hicks, please. We turn to our final item, number 12, please. Madam Clerk, if you would, please.
Consider an introduction of ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fairfield adding Article 16, Vehicle Habitation Prohibited, to Chapter 11, Motor Vehicles and Traffic of the Fairfield City Code to prohibit the use of vehicles for human habitation.
The City Council had asked us to take a look at whether an ordinance could be adopted that would prohibit human habitation of vehicles on city streets. And We have took that direction, and at the time, there is a court case out of Los Angeles that struck down a similar type of ordinance, but we felt there was a way of satisfying the requirements of that court case. Let me just wait for a second here. So we have drafted the ordinance now to address the issues raised in the Los Angeles case and defining the human habitation of vehicles in a very precise way. So the way this, and we believe this ordinance is fully constitutional and enforceable. So what the ordinance will do is it does prohibit anyone from using a vehicle between the hours of 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. for human habitation, whether it's sleeping or other type of living accommodations within the vehicle. That's not what the vehicle is intended for. And at the same time, we have defined this between 10 and 5 because, frankly, during the daytime, if someone took a nap in their car, that wouldn't be a violation of the code. And that was the problem with the LA ordinance. It was so broad, it would prevent someone from even having a snack in the car or taking a nap. So I think this avoids those problems, and our recommendation here is working with staff would be for the council to introduce the ordinance this evening. And with the introduction, we would bring it back in 2 weeks for adoption.
Discussion, colleagues? Councilman Moy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the city attorney for putting together something. Obviously, we think it's important that it's constitutional. I would just like to bring up the real importance of this. I work with homeless people every day, and some of them, a lot of them, they choose to save their money, and they'll tell you they're going to buy an RV so they can sleep in it on the streets. And so it's important, not just for homeless folks, but for anybody to not sleep in vehicles overnight in the city, not just targeting the homeless, obviously, but for everybody. And there are problems throughout our city with this, and I'm getting more and more complaints from citizens about it. So I wanted to thank you and staff for putting together something that we can sign on to and not worry about violating anybody's civil rights.
Ditto.
Okay. Any other comments, colleagues?
Oh, yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously, this is a problem. It's just, we're all tackling.
Yeah.
So, good job.
It becomes a public safety hazard as well. So our direction will be to...
So a motion would be to waive further reading of the ordinance and to introduce it for first reading.
Moved by Councilman Bertani, seconded by Councilman Moy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. And again, thank you very much for bringing it to our attention.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to just make a suggestion. Could we convene the meeting as far as, honoring all the first responders, but also our prayers for the people that lost their lives in their homes in this fire?
You took the words right out of my mouth. That indeed.